The river had been patient for 11 years. That was how long Ethan Cole had lived on Garner Street. Close enough to the Briar Fork to hear it on quiet nights, a low, persistent murmur beneath the floor of the house, beneath the sleep of his daughter, beneath whatever version of peace he had managed to build since Claire died. He had grown accustomed to the sound, even fond of it. The way you grow fond of something that has never hurt you. That Thursday in late October, the murmur had changed pitch before noon. He noticed it the way you notice a neighbor's dog barking at nothing enough to look up from the carburetor he was cleaning. Enough to glance at the window, then not enough to stop what he was doing. The garage sat attached to the right side of the house, a single wide bay with a corrugated metal roof and 3 fluorescent tubes overhead, one of which flickered at irregular intervals. Ethan had been meaning to replace it for 2 months. He'd been meaning to do many things for 2 months. The transmission fluid in his truck needed cycling. The gutter on the north side of the house had a sag in the middle. Lily's bicycle had a bent front wheel from when she'd ridden it off the curb on Henderson Road, and he hadn't gotten around to straightening it. You run the numbers in your head when you're a single parent living on what a small-town repair shop brings in. And most of the time the numbers don't add up neatly. So you choose. You keep the lights on. You keep the refrigerator stocked. You fix the things that keep the business running, and everything else waits in a queue that never quite reaches zero. Lily came in at 5:30, the way she always did on days he let her walk back from the Glenwood Elementary bus stop, 7 years old and already possessed of a seriousness that made strangers ask him if she was 8, maybe 9. She set her backpack on the plastic chair by the garage door and climbed up on the stool beside the workbench, elbows on the metal surface, chin in her palms, watching him work. "Mrs. Paulson said there's a flood watch," she said. "There's always a watch this time of year. She said it's different this time." Ethan didn't look up. Teachers have to say that. It's the responsible thing. Lily considered this with the gravity she applied to most things. She seemed actually scared, though. "Were you scared?" "A little." "Then, I wasn't." He set the carburetor down and finally looked at her. She had Claire's coloring, the dark auburn hair, the gray-green eyes that changed with the light, and she had Claire's habit of sitting very still when she was thinking something through. It was the kind of resemblance that used to hit him sideways, early on. Now it just lived in him. "We're on the second highest street in this part of town," he said. "The water would have to climb a long way to bother us." "How long?" "Long enough." She seemed satisfied with that. Or not satisfied. Exactly, Lily didn't do satisfied, but willing to table the question. They ate dinner at 6:15. He made pasta with the canned tomatoes and the last of the sausage from the freezer, and Lily arranged her food into zones before eating it. A habit he'd stopped questioning. Outside, the rain had started for real, not the hesitant drizzle of the afternoon, but the full-weight kind, the kind that turned gutters into small rivers and erased the distinction between sky and ground. "Dad," Lily said, twirling her fork, "do you think Mom would have liked storms?" He put his own fork down. She asked about Claire in this way, not with grief, exactly, but with the focused curiosity of someone trying to complete a picture they'd been given only fragments of. Claire had died when Lily was 14 months old. A car accident on the interstate, a patch of black ice. A semi that drifted 4 feet into the wrong lane. It had been the kind of loss that doesn't diminish so much as it relocates. It moves out of the foreground and into everything else, becomes part of the texture of a life. She didn't mind them, he said. She'd read through the bad ones. She liked the sound, I think. Said it was like the world was washing itself. Lily thought about this. I like them too. Mostly. Mostly? When they don't turn into floods. He almost laughed. Fair enough. The emergency alert came at 8:47, while Lily was brushing her teeth. Ethan's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a sharp, aggressive tone he associated with wildfires and amber alerts, not floods. He read the screen. Then he read it again. Flash flood. Emergency Briar Fork. Watershed. Immediate evacuation. Recommended for zones A through D. This is not a drill. Garner Street was Zone C. He stood very still for 3 seconds. Then he went to Lily's doorway. She was still in the bathroom, visible in the narrow strip of light, toothbrush in hand. "Get your shoes," he said. "Take your coat. The good one." She looked at him in the mirror. "How bad?" "I don't know yet. Get your shoes." He went to the garage and dragged the coiled rope from the high shelf 60 feet of half-inch nylon he'd bought for a job 2 winters ago and never returned. He pulled on his work boots without sitting down, grabbed the waterproof flashlight from the drawer beside the water heater. Lily appeared in the doorway with her coat half on, her face calm in the way that meant she was afraid and managing it. "We going to a shelter? I'm going to check on a few people first. Mrs. Hargrove's still here. Her son was supposed to come get her tonight. I'll come with you. You'll wait at the Donovans. Their place is higher than ours." "I'll be 20 minutes. She looked at him for a moment, then nodded once. That single nod, compact, trusting, was one of the things that kept him honest about what he was doing with his life. He dropped her at the Donovans, 3 houses uphill. Then he pulled on his rain jacket and walked toward the sound of the water. What he found at the bottom of Garner Street stopped him. The Briar Fork had not merely risen, it had reorganized. The low section of Millhaven Road, always the first to flood, the town's known weak point, was under 2 feet of fast-moving brown water, and the water was still climbing. Streetlights reflected off the surface in broken orange lines. 3 cars were already abandoned in the road, doors hanging open. A dog was barking somewhere in a register that suggested it understood what was happening. Mrs. Hargrove was on her porch, standing in the dark with a canvas bag and her cat carrier. He waded to her through ankle-deep overflow, took her arm, and walked her uphill to the shelter the Baptist church had opened on Route 9. The whole round trip was 14 minutes. He was on his way back when he heard the horn. Car horns, in ordinary life, are expressions of impatience. That night, in the sound of the flood, the grinding roar of water against structures, the percussion of debris, the distant alarms, a horn meant something entirely different. It meant someone was still inside. He ran toward it. The water on Millhaven had risen another 4 inches since he'd crossed it. He could feel the difference immediately, the way it pressed against his shins with more intention. His flashlight cut through the rain and landed on a dark SUV, angled nose down in a drainage ditch on the east side of the road, water already at the door handles. The current was moving around it with a soft, purposeful sound. A woman's face at the driver's window. Hands on the glass, mouth open. He heard the horn cut off. The electric system was going. There were 4 other people on the road. In that moment, he registered them peripherally. Figures at the edge of the floodwater, watching. No one moved toward the car. Later, he would not judge them for this. The water was fast and dark and full of things that couldn't be seen. He tied the rope around a concrete utility pole with a half-hitch that his hands found from memory. He'd spent 3 years in structural rescue work before Lily was born, before the budget cuts, before the contractor job that had eventually become the garage. His hands still knew the knots. He tested the tension once. Then he stepped into the water. The cold hit him like something physical and intentional, not just temperature but pressure. The current finding the gaps in his clothing and pressing through. He moved diagonally against it, using the rope to hold his line, keeping his feet planted and shuffling. The flashlight he'd wedged into his jacket collar, the beam aimed forward, mostly useless in the moving brown water. The SUV was 8 feet into the ditch. He reached the driver's door and grabbed the handle. The water was chest-high on the car now. He could see the woman clearly through the glass, dark hair plastered to her face, one hand on the wheel, one pressed to the window. She was shouting something he couldn't hear. He tried the handle. Locked. Either automatic lock from the accident or the central locking system freezing. He held the door with one hand to keep himself anchored, the rope going taut across his chest, and looked at the window. Safety glass. It wouldn't break with a fist. He reached into his jacket pocket. Found the seatbelt cutter he'd carried since his rescue days, an old habit he'd never broken. The spring-loaded punch was still functional. He pressed it against the lower corner of the driver's window and drove it in. The glass spiderwebbed and dropped in chunks. Water immediately began pouring into the car. The woman gasped a sharp, involuntary sound and pushed against the door from inside. He pulled from outside. Together they got it open against the current. She came out sideways and went under immediately. He had already reached for her one arm through the window, catching fabric, then a wrist. He pulled hard. The rope went rigid across his chest, and he felt his feet leave the bottom for a half-second before he planted them again. She surfaced. Gasping, choking, grabbing his arm with both hands. "I have you," he said, or thought he said. The water was too loud to know if he was audible. He moved her to the rope and put her hands on it. "Hold this. Don't let go. Move toward the pole." Hand over hand. She stared at him. For one instant, despite the cold, the dark, the noise, she seemed to actually see him. His face. His eyes. Then she nodded and moved. He kept his hand on her arm until they reached the shallower water at the road's edge. A man from the small crowd had waded in to help, not far, but far enough to reach her and pull her the last few feet. Ethan worked himself free of the current and stood on the road's surface, water pouring off him, breathing hard. Someone put a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" He nodded. He turned to look at the woman. She was on her knees on the wet pavement, coughing, both arms wrapped around herself. She lifted her head and looked at him across the 5 feet of water-slick road between them. She opened her mouth. He didn't wait. He unwound the rope from the pole, coiled it under his arm, and walked uphill. The rescue team arrived at Millhaven Road 11 minutes later. By then, the water had risen another foot, and the SUV had shifted another 6 feet down the ditch. The woman later identified to the responding EMT only as Jane Doe, approximate age early 40s. No ID recovered, was in mild hypothermia and severe shock. She was transported to Creston County General before her name was known. She asked about the man who pulled her out before the ambulance doors closed. The EMT asked the people nearby. A few had seen someone. Nobody got a name. Ethan was home by 9:45. He brought Lily back from the Donovans at 10:15. Once he'd confirmed the water wouldn't reach their street. He hung his soaked jacket over the shower rod and sat on the edge of Lily's bed while she settled under the covers. The house smelled like wet concrete and rope fiber. "Did you find Mrs. Hargrove?" Lily asked. "She's at the church. She's fine. Did anything else happen?" He was quiet for a moment. "Someone's car went into the ditch on Millhaven. I helped them get out." Lily looked at him with those gray-green eyes. "Were they okay?" "They will be." She reached up and put her hand flat on his arm. Just for a second, the way she'd done since she was 3, a gesture she hadn't grown out of. "We help when we can," she said. It was something he'd told her once, when she was 5, and asking why he'd driven a stranger's car to the mechanic after a breakdown on Route 9. She had taken it and kept it. "We help when we can," he agreed. He sat there until her breathing evened out. Then he went to the kitchen and drank 2 glasses of water standing at the sink. Looking at the dark window, listening to the rain start to ease. In 3 days, he would find out who she was. But that night, he didn't think about her at all. Her name was Victoria Hale. This became public knowledge within 24 hours, through the way information moves in connected circles when a notable person is involved. A source inside Creston County General, a local journalist with a contact at the hospital, a wire report picked up by regional outlets. Millionaire CEO Victoria Hale rescued from flash flood, identity of rescuer, unknown. Victoria Hale was 43 years old. She had been driving herself from a conference in Allensburg back to the airport. Taken an unfamiliar route through Claremont Township to avoid a construction detour, and had been caught on Millhaven Road when the flood warning she hadn't seen upgraded itself to an emergency. The SUV leased, not hers, had hydroplaned into the ditch at low speed. The electric locks had jammed in the impact. She was CEO of Hale Logistics Group, a mid-sized infrastructure and transport company with roughly $200 million in annual revenue and operations across 8 states. She had been named in 3 consecutive years on regional business leadership lists. She had a reputation in her industry as precise, demanding, and difficult to read, not cold, exactly, but controlled in a way that kept most people at a professional distance. She was discharged from Creston County General the morning after the flood. Her personal assistant, a composed young man named Marcus Briggs, met her at the hospital entrance with dry clothes, coffee, and a leather portfolio. She dressed, drank the coffee in 3 minutes, and made 6 phone calls before the car reached the highway. The 7th call, she made herself. "I need to find out who pulled me out of that car," she said to the man on the other end of the line, Garrett Foss, her head of security. "There's footage from one traffic camera on Millhaven. I need everything it has. The image quality and flood conditions at night. I know. Do it anyway." The footage was grainy and partial. It showed a figure in a dark jacket, moving into the water. It showed a rope tied to a pole. It showed 2 people coming out of the current. The figure's face was never clearly visible, but there was a partial image, 3 frames, under 1 second of usable footage of his left hand gripping the window frame of the SUV. And on that wrist, visible in the reflected glow of the streetlight, a particular kind of watch. Military surplus, olive green face, worn leather strap. An unusual specific item. Garrett Foss was very good at his job. It took him 48 hours. Ethan didn't watch the news. This was not a principled position. He had no television, and his internet consisted of a phone plan that ran slow by the 3rd week of the billing cycle. He knew Victoria Hale's name the way most people in the area did. Vaguely. From passing context, he knew the flood had been significant. He did not know his own name was being looked for. He spent the 2 days after the flood doing the things that needed doing. The garage had taken on 4 inches of water on the morning of the flood. He'd come home to find his shop floor submerged, his toolboxes wading in muddy water. The electric outlets on the south wall had shorted. The compressor motor needed inspecting. He spent Friday and Saturday pulling equipment, drying it, testing it, cataloging what was recoverable and what wasn't. The compressor was gone. That was $400 he didn't have a clear plan for. He opened his phone and looked at the repair shop account and did the math twice, and then put the phone in his pocket and went back to work, because looking at the numbers again wasn't going to change them. Lily had a cough on Saturday morning. The kind that came from being out in the wet and cold. Not serious, he could hear that immediately, but the kind that needed watching, that reminded you how thin the margin was between manageable and overwhelming when you were doing this alone. He made her honey and ginger water, which she drank with the polite skepticism she applied to home remedies, and let her stay on the couch with a blanket and a book. On Saturday afternoon, a church volunteer came by with a form for emergency flood assistance. The county had set up a relief fund. Ethan thanked her, read the form, and set it on the counter. He didn't fill it out. The Morgans on the next block had lost their basement apartment entirely. Old Dennis Veitch had lost his shed and his riding mower. People who relied on those things professionally had lost a season's income. The fund should go to them, he thought, to people whose situations were genuinely worse than his own. The garage was damaged. It wasn't gone. He'd figure it out. "You're doing the pride thing again," his neighbor Helen said. She was 61, retired from the county school system, and felt that 11 years of neighboring someone entitled her to direct observation. She said this from across the low fence between their backyards Sunday afternoon, watching him carry a still wet toolbox to the driveway. "I'm doing the math thing," he said. "The math is that you need the money. The math is that other people need it more." Helen looked at him for a moment. "Claire used to say you were impossible. She wasn't wrong. She also said she trusted you completely." Helen picked up the mug she'd brought out. "There's a difference between trust and approval." He thought about that for a while after she went inside. Sunday evening was quiet. Lily had improved, the cough fading. He made grilled cheese because that was what she asked for. They played 2 rounds of a card game she'd brought home from school, and she won both times. Fair. He did dishes while she finished her homework at the kitchen table. He was putting the last bowl on the drying rack when he heard the sound. Low, rhythmic, mechanical. Coming from the sky. Lily heard it first, which meant he had approximately 10 seconds before she was at the window. She was there in 7. "Dad," she said. Her voice was careful and specific, the tone she used when something was real and significant, and she wasn't sure yet how to handle it. "Dad, there's a helicopter." He came to stand beside her. Through the smudged glass of the front window, they watched the helicopter descend toward the flat section of Grayson Field, the public park 2 blocks over. It was a corporate aircraft. He could see the civilian markings, the clean lines that were nothing like military or emergency services. Not large, but purposeful. The neighbors were already on porches. He could see lights flicking on across the street. Lily turned to look at him. "Are they looking for something?" she asked. "I don't know." He put his hand on her shoulder. Together, they watched the helicopter settle. A figure climbed out, one person, moving across the wet grass in the direction of Garner Street. Behind the figure, two other people from the aircraft stayed near it. Ethan watched the single figure cross the park. He watched the direction she was walking. He understood what was happening about 30 seconds before she reached the sidewalk in front of his house. He opened the front door before she knocked. Victoria Hale was wearing jeans and a dark coat. She was not dressed for a board meeting or a photograph. She stopped on the porch step and looked at him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She was composed. He would give her that. Whatever the last 3 days had cost her internally, she had processed it into something functional, a steadiness in the eyes, a deliberateness in the way she stood. But there was something else too, under the composure, something she hadn't fully put away. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Miss Hale." A pause. Behind him, Lily had appeared at his elbow. Victoria Hale looked down at the small girl. Something shifted in her expression briefly, almost imperceptibly. "You must be Lily," she said. Lily looked at her, then at Ethan, then back. "Yes, I'm Victoria. I owe your father something I don't know how to repay." Lily considered this with her usual gravity. "You could come in," she said. "It's cold." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Lily had done homework an hour earlier, where 2 coffee mugs left rings on the wood surface that Ethan had long since stopped trying to prevent. Victoria kept her coat on for the first few minutes. Lily brought her a glass of water and then positioned herself in the chair beside Ethan, not crowding him but close. Victoria spoke carefully. "I found you through the watch," she said. "A traffic camera image. My security team traced the watch to a purchase at a military surplus store in Pratt County. You put it on a debit card. That's a long chain. And I'm sorry for following it. I didn't know another way." "You could have not looked," Ethan said. He said it without hostility. "Just as a fact, I could have," she agreed. "But I needed to find you for a reason that wasn't just gratitude." She looked at the table surface for a moment. "That's actually the easier part of what I have to say." He waited. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "Specifically, not just the news version. CEO of Hale Logistics, based out of Allensburg. Before I was CEO, Hale Logistics was contracted by the state to manage emergency infrastructure services in 7 counties in this region. That included the Briar Fork Watershed Early Warning System. We held that contract for 4 years. He was very still. During that contract period, Victoria continued, we had a safety and response division. 14 people at peak staffing. They were responsible for real-time monitoring, maintenance of the flood sensors, coordination with county emergency services. She paused. In the 3rd year of the contract, our board authorized a cost reduction initiative. The response division was cut from 14 people to 4. The monitoring protocols were scaled back from continuous to interval-based. "I know," Ethan said. She looked at him. "I know," he said again. "I was one of the 14. The kitchen was very quiet. Lily had stopped moving. "You were let go in the 3rd year restructuring," Victoria said. It was not a question, she had the records. "Your personnel file notes your performance as exceptional. Your supervisor's report specifically recommended against your termination. The decision was made above the supervisor level. As part of a blanket reduction." She paused. "By me. I signed off on it." He didn't look away from her. He didn't move. "The warning system on Briar Fork failed Thursday night," she said. "Not completely. The county alert still went out. But it went out 11 minutes later than it would have under the old protocol. 11 minutes. She set her hands flat on the table. "In a flash flood, 11 minutes is—" "I know what 11 minutes is," he said. There it was. The actual shape of the thing. Not just, "You saved my life," but the system that endangered my life was my system, And the person it hurt first, the person it made redundant before it made me vulnerable, was you. She didn't look away from him. I don't know what to do with that, she said. It sounded like something she'd spent 3 days trying to find a different version of. I don't know how to frame it cleanly. I've been in business long enough to know that decisions made at the board level have consequences that don't reach you until they're standing in a floodwater. You cut the team, he said. The sensors went to interval check. The response time lagged. Yes. And then the flood that the lagged system didn't catch fast enough put you in a ditch on Millhaven Road. Yes. He looked at the table. Then at Lily, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't fully read: seriousness, and something quieter beneath it. You didn't come here to apologize, he said. I came here to do both, Victoria said. But I'm aware that an apology for something like this is... She stopped. I'm aware of what it is, and what it isn't. He nodded once, then he looked up. The team had 6 months of warning before the cuts went through, he said. We flagged the sensor reduction 3 separate times in writing. Went up through the supervisor to the regional manager. Nobody escalated it. I know. I read those memos 3 days ago. For the first time, he said nothing. I should have read them when they were sent, she said. That's the part I can't fix. It was Lily who moved first. She stood up, picked up her empty glass, rinsed it in the sink, and set it in the drying rack. The small, practical sound of it, water, ceramic, the soft clink seemed to reset the temperature in the room. She turned around and looked at Victoria. Are you going to help us fix the garage? She asked. Ethan said, Lily, the compressor's broken, Lily said, with the directness of someone who has heard the word budget used as a complete sentence more times than she could count. And the south wall outlets, and Dad hasn't filled out the county form. Victoria looked at Lily for a moment. Yes, she said. If your father allows it. He won't at first, Lily said. He'll say no, probably twice. But he usually comes around. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Victoria almost smiled. It was the most unguarded thing he'd seen from her. She placed a single sheet of paper on the table. Not a check, a document. He picked it up. It was a formal record of review. His personnel file from Hale Logistics, annotated and officially corrected. The notation that had flagged his termination as performance-related budget reallocation, a categorization that had followed him, that had made his references complicated for the 18 months after, that had contributed to why he'd ended up with a small garage, instead of continuing in structural response work, was marked for removal and correction. In its place, the language was precise. Termination due to organizational restructuring. Performance record. Exceptional. No adverse findings. He read it twice. That's the first thing, Victoria said. It should have been corrected the day it was written. It wasn't. He set the paper down carefully. The second thing, she said, is a proposal. Not a gift, a proposal you can refuse. She took a breath. Hale Logistics is in negotiation with the county to renew a modified version of the infrastructure contract. As part of that renewal, I'm establishing a community emergency preparedness division distinct from the corporate structure, with its own board oversight and state certification requirements. 12 positions, full-time, with a director role at the top. She looked at him. I'd like you to be considered for the director position. Formally applied for, competitively reviewed, transparently selected, not handed to you, offered as a legitimate candidate. He was quiet for a long moment. The third thing, she said, is simpler. The garage damage is eligible under the county relief fund I checked, and it falls within the parameters. I'd like to fund the repair directly, not through the county mechanism, to ensure it's handled without delay, not as a personal payment, as a corrective action from the company. She paused, and Lily mentioned medical coverage. I'd like to offer an extension of company health care to your household, retroactive to the date of your termination, which is when it should have continued under proper severance. The kitchen was still. He looked at the document on the table, then at the window, where the field across the street was dark, the helicopter invisible but present. You brought all of this on a helicopter, he said. I wasn't sure you'd see me if I called first. He thought about that. You were probably right. He looked at Lily. She was watching him with that expression, patient, steady. The one she'd developed somewhere around age 5 and never quite lost. The director position, he said, legitimately considered, Victoria confirmed. If you don't get it on the merits, you don't get it. And if I do, then you spend your working hours doing what you spent Thursday night doing. But with better equipment and 11 more minutes, he let that sit. I'll take the garage repair, he said. Through the company mechanism, the way you described. And the insurance that one's not about me. That one I'd be a fool to refuse for her. He tilted his head toward Lily. And the director position? He looked at the document on the table again. The corrected record. His name, rendered accurately, finally. I'll apply, he said. If the process is what you say it is, then I'll apply. Victoria nodded. She reached for the document and produced a pen from her coat pocket. She signed the bottom of the page and slid it back across the table to him. That's the official copy, she said. You keep it. Victoria stood to leave 20 minutes later. She'd finished the water Lily had brought her, answered 2 questions Lily asked with complete straightforwardness. Yes, she had been scared in the car. No, she had never been in a helicopter until she bought one 4 years ago and helped Ethan locate, on his phone, the specific form for the county-corrected garage repair submission. At the door, she paused. I don't know what the right version of this is, she said. I'm not sure there is one. I made decisions from a distance that had real consequences for specific people. And I didn't know their names until the consequences came back around to me. She stopped. I'm not offering any of this because it makes me feel better. I want to be clear about that. What does it do for you, then? He asked. She thought about it. It makes the record accurate. That's smaller than I'd like it to be. But it's what I can do. He nodded. One more thing, she said. I'd like to come back. Not. She seemed to recalibrate. Not in a formal capacity. Just. If that's something that made sense. At some point. He looked at her steadily. You can call first, he said. That part was negotiable. Something in her face changed briefly, just a shift around the eyes. Fair enough, she said. She walked back across the wet grass toward the field. He stood in the doorway and watched the helicopter lift. Lily appeared beside him. She'll come back, Lily said. Probably. Next time without the helicopter. I'd guess so. Lily looked up at him. She seemed like she was trying really hard. She was. That counts for something. Yes, he said. It counts for something. He put his arm around her shoulders, and they stood there until the sound faded into the ordinary silence of the neighborhood. A dog, somewhere distant. The last of the evening traffic on Route 9. The Briar Fork, invisible but audible, running lower now, returning to something like its usual self. The garage took 9 days to repair. The contractor Victoria had arranged was local, a woman named Dana Holt, who ran a small crew and had done work in the township for 12 years. She did not mention who had arranged the payment. She showed up Monday morning with 2 workers and a truck of supplies, and simply got on with it. The south wall outlets were replaced. The compressor motor was swapped out for a unit that was, if he was honest, better than what he'd had before. The floor was sealed. On the second day, Dana's crew found that the rear corner post had a hairline crack from the water's pressure. They repaired it without being asked, then showed it to Ethan afterward. He looked at the repair, then at Dana. That wasn't in the original scope, he said. It was structural, she said. Structural's always in scope. He thought about that for a while. Lily went back to school the Monday after the flood. Cough, fully gone. With a project about watershed hydrology she'd started on her own over the weekend. Her teacher, a young man named Mr. Callie, who taught 3rd grade with genuine enthusiasm, sent home a note that said Lily had explained to the class, accurately, how interval sensor monitoring created emergency response lag times. The note said he was impressed. He also said he was slightly concerned. Ethan put the note on the refrigerator. The formal application for the Emergency Preparedness Director position was posted on the State Contracting Board's public site on November 6th. He spent 2 evenings drafting his application letter, using the kitchen table, with Lily doing homework across from him. He did not mention Victoria Hale anywhere in the application. He listed his previous experience, his certifications, his 3 years in structural rescue, his knowledge of the Briar Fork watershed specifically. He submitted it on Thursday at 11:14 in the evening. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't know what to tell. Victoria came back on a Saturday in mid-November. She drove herself. A practical dark sedan, not the company vehicle, he noted this. She parked at the curb and walked up the porch steps and knocked. And when he opened the door, she was holding a paper bag from Dunham's Bakery on Main Street, which he recognized because Lily had a specific opinion about their apple fritters. "I didn't know what to bring," she said. "That's the right answer," he said. He stepped back and let her in. Lily appeared from the living room with the inevitable precision of a 7-year-old who has been listening. She looked at the bakery bag, then at Victoria. Then she went to the kitchen and came back with plates. They sat at the kitchen table. The same chairs, except Lily had dragged a third chair from the spare room at some point in the previous week, positioning it at the end of the table as though she had always planned for this. Victoria noticed the chair. She looked at Lily, who was now cutting an apple fritter into segments with the concentration of a surgeon. "Did you plan ahead?" Victoria asked her. "The table only had 2 chairs that were easy to get to," Lily said, without looking up. "It seemed like bad planning." Victoria looked at Ethan. He lifted one shoulder. "This is what she's like." They drank coffee. Victoria had brought decent beans from somewhere, which Ethan made in the press because the drip machine had died in August and was still on the queue, and ate bakery pastries and talked. Not about the flood, not about the contract, not about the helicopter. Victoria asked Lily about the watershed project. Lily asked Victoria whether she had ever been to the river in normal conditions, which Victoria admitted she had not. Lily said that was a problem and they should fix it. At one point, Ethan told a story about the summer he'd spent working on a bridge maintenance crew before his rescue certification. And Victoria laughed a real laugh, not a polished one, the kind that seems to surprise the person producing it. He noticed. When she left 2 hours later, she paused on the porch. "I have a meeting in Allensburg Tuesday," she said. "Nothing local, until probably December." "Okay," he said. "I'll call," she said. Like a person, he agreed. She walked to the car. He watched her go. Behind him, Lily's voice, very quiet. "She laughed at your bridge story. I noticed. It was a good story." A pause. "Dad? You should tell her the one about the rope and the water tower. That one's better." He turned around. Lily was leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed, utterly satisfied with herself. "Go finish your homework," he said. She grinned rare, full, unguarded, and disappeared inside. He stood on the porch for another moment. The neighborhood was still. The trees along Garner Street had lost most of their leaves, and the sky had the particular pale quality of late November, clean and cold, and very high. Down the block, the Briar Fork ran where it always ran, inside its banks now, minding the boundary. He went inside. Lily was at the table. She had set his coffee mug where it had been, just to the left of the center. She had not moved the third chair. He sat down, picked up his mug, and looked at his daughter. "Your homework," he said. "In a minute," she said. "I'm thinking." "About what?" She looked up. "About how things that break sometimes get fixed better than they were before." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Outside, the Briar Fork ran on. The garage stood sound in its repaired frame. The corrected document sat in the drawer beside the kitchen window, underneath the utility receipts and Lily's school forms and the coffee-ringed notepad where he kept his work logs. And at the kitchen table, in the third chair, in the ordinary afternoon, there was room for what came next.